Hey guys, Tom again, Pernstar channel. We're back at Gem Sport for more FDF part installs on the S550 Mustang. Please excuse the quality of the production. The media guys at a drift event, so I'm doing this on my own. I know it's gonna look like crap, but I'm gonna try. Last time we installed everything on the rear end of the car. Today we're doing the opposite. Today we're going to install the angle kit on the front, and I'm super stoked to see how it's going to sit when that's done, because it's just going to be shopping cart levels of bunkeredness of angle. So excited for that. It's going to look stupid, and we'll document what it takes to do this. Just another weekend dressed like a hobo, racing on race cars. Okay, got the little protection cap off for the spindle nut. 36mm socket seems to be right. I don't know, a little loosey, but I don't have a 35, so seems to be close enough. Wonderful. The beauties of Southern cars. No corrosion anywhere. The whole corner should be able to come out then. And since we're not going to reuse any of this, might as well drop the whole thing.
So how'd you get this car again, Tom?
I bought it. Oh man, look at that! Freaking Florida car. So far we only needed a 15mm socket for the brake caliper and for the strut tower. Then I used a 36mm socket, right, wrong, or indifferent, to get the spindle nut off. And now let's find out what else we're gonna need. Tie rod's an 18mm. So Josh is always teasing me about working on my knees squatted down next to the car. That's just a habit because I have a mid-rise lift at home, and so I always forget to raise the car up. So we'll do that soon. Sway bar end link appears to be another 18. Sway bar end link, 17mm wrench, and an 18mm socket. For stock parts, this is actually pretty decent, because the way this is set up is you have a wrench flat back here, and you have your nut, and you have a hex on the end, so all kinds of ways to get a hold of this. Seen a lot worse than that. So there's two lower control arms. This one here has a weld nut on the back, it looks like. So you're just gonna need a 21mm to get the bolt out. So I was just getting ready to take these arms out of the car, and I just wanted to show you guys something. So this car has two lower control arms with two individual ball joints connected to the knuckle. And again, the peasant spec cars that I normally work on, I've never seen something like that before. Look at the geometry of the arms. Like, as you're steering, your arm position changes. So this isn't like one control arm that remains in the same shape. It's two control arms that move relative to each other when the steering angle changes. And of course then it'll also change, you know, as the load on the wheel changes and it travels up and down in the car basically. But this is some really interesting, sophisticated stuff, you know. So when people rip on Mustangs being crap cars, and that like imports are so much more sophisticated, like the front and rear suspension on this thing are impressive to say the least. Eyeballing it wasn't too bad. Ended up being 24mm. And I'm not sure that the nut is welded on. I haven't checked, but it's not moving, so works for me. Yeah, myth confirmed. Weld nut. Ta-da! Loosey-goosey. One arm's out. Sweet. So the whole front corner is now disconnected. It's only hanging on the top mounts of the strut. So 3 more 15s and we're done. Victory is mine. The simple things that make Northerners happy. Seeing a 6-year-old wheel bearing that you can pull off the spindle without a hammer. I mean, that's just basically pornographic to me. Lower control arms on the right don't look the same as on the left. There's also a bent tie rod and there was a bent suspension arm in the back. So this thing definitely has seen a little bit of an adventure. Where we're going, we don't need wheel speed sensors. So as you can see, this tie rod is bent quite a bit, but we're gonna have to leave it on the car for now, even though I'm not a fan of this. It'll do for the initial install. The problem that we're having is I've got a tie rod removal tool with the inserts, but these tie rods have a larger wrench size on them than my tool goes to, and the accessibility to the inner tie rod is really awful on this car, it turns out. Between the way that the cradle works out, it's like you can't get a big adjustable wrench on there and have any room to work with. So just gonna leave the stock tie rod in there, bent and all, temporarily, just to get the kit on the car, and then when it's time to do the alignment, we'll swap that out. Okay, so first thing we'll have to do for the actual install is here, you see the driver's side strut tower, and you can see that FDF logo gleaming through there. So this is the coil-over top head from FDF, and you can see in the middle there's a logo, not the actual shock rod. So we're going to have to go under the car. So here you have the FDF top head. Comes with its own bolts instead of studs like the factory struts do. I've bolted this to the tower, and now here you can see where the actual pillow ball mount is. This is what you're going to attach your coil-over to. So we need to make clearance in the tower to actually be able to use that. So it's time to start cutting. So now that we've marked the spot, we're just going to start with a relatively small drill bit. I've talked about how Josh always makes fun of me for forgetting to use the lift. Not today. I remembered. Want to see what the situation looks like up top, but I think we'll not fight gravity on this one and just drill from the top down. Perfect, so the final stage, put a nice chamfer on there. So I'm going to go underneath. So off camera, I just vacuumed this mess real quick. And now you can see that there is clearance for the new shock location. Whether that's enough clearance or not, we'll find out, but I always try to cut the absolute minimum and go from there. So, coilovers up next. Here we have our fresh out of the box ISC front coilover. Based on the top head marking here, this is the left one. I don't think it's going to make a difference for our purposes, because it looks like the shock body and everything is actually universally the same between the two. The top heads will be different, but of course with the FDF kit we're not going to be using those. So I'm going to take the tension off the spring. It's one of the nice things about coilovers such as these, is that you don't have to mess with a spring compressor. There's no more preload on it. So now we can just pop the nut off the top, and the impact should make short work of that, I'm hoping. There we go. We're going to reuse the top nut and maybe this washer. Here's the ISC pillow ball mount. Oh, that's all very nice actually. Nice. So the FDF top heads actually came with misalignment spacers for the spherical, but it looks like we'll just reuse all the hardware that came off the ISC. Yeah, looks like it has all the clearance it needs. So here we go. In the car, this will be located as such. So you'll bolt to your knuckle. This will of course go into your strut tower. And so now when you looked at where we drilled this hole to clear the top of the shock rod, we moved right in the center of the D here, would be where the strut normally is mounted as a reference. So now this allowed us to move the shock forward and outwards. So the forward movement reduces our caster and the outward movement corrects our KPI, because obviously our arms are going to be way extended, so our KPI is going to grow. So now we're bringing the top outwards to correct the KPI. So this is all designed to work as a system from FDF. The arms, the knuckles, the top mounts, it all goes together and makes sense as a system. Okay, so coilover is mounted. There is two different types of fasteners for the FDF top heads. The shorter one goes right here, and that's a 13mm socket. The other two are 14mm sockets. And me personally, I wouldn't go hog wild on torquing those down because they're going into aluminum. I'm reaching under the car to move the coilover, and it looks like that clearance hole that we cut is doing the trick just fine. So now we're going to repeat the process for the passenger side. And one thing that I just wanted to verify real quick is there's a ground wire right there on the top of the strut tower, and Josiah designed the mount smart enough that it doesn't get in the way. So no other modifications required, just the same thing we did on the other side. Just mark it from underneath, drill through, and then open up that hole to get clearance. And then we're on our way to wrapping this install up here quickly. Passenger side is done. Followed the same method you saw before. It's just this time I paid attention to what size hole this actually is, and it is 1.25 inches. So I hope that helps you when acquiring the right drill bit for the job. Time for coilover number 2. Same procedure. Loosen the preload on the spring. Get the top off. Yeah, an impact is real nice for this job. Makes it super quick and easy. Yeah, and I apologize for the visuals. I was sweating my ass off the last couple days working in here. So it was tank top time, and I just reviewed a little bit of the footage earlier. And with the lighting in here, I'm whiter than a ghost because it's been a long winter. So excuse the visuals. I may have to put some kind of color filter over top of this video, so I'm not looking quite like a sheet of paper. We're gonna worry about all the adjustments later, but typically most manuals for coilovers that I've seen tell you to put about 5 millimeters of preload on the spring. So we're gonna worry about that later. For now, just making sure all the parts actually go together. Let's quickly go over how the FDF kit goes on the car. I've got this roughly pre-assembled. So you can see back here is the lower control arm mount towards the front. Here's the lower control arm mount towards the back. They correspond with these two heim joints right here. So you've got a split arm design, and it looks like the tie rod is actually going to run through this arm. It's an interesting design choice. Then here you have a tab welded onto the lower control arm that allows you to tie it to the sway bar, so you're not losing the ability to run a front sway bar from the looks of things. On the knuckle, this is the interface for the brake caliper. Obviously you have your spindle for your wheel bearing hub assembly, and then you put your spindle nut on here. This is really interesting. I haven't seen that on other FDF kits yet, so I'm not sure how well this is going to come across just now, but you'll see it better later when I actually put this on the car. But there are plates sandwiched on the knuckle, and these plates allow you to lock in the camber. So that's an interesting way to do this. So you can see you've got slotted holes up here, and then this plate can move on the bottom, and that allows you to basically make use of the range from camber from all the way here to camber all the way there. So this would take camber out, this would add more negative camber, and then so that this gives you more integrity when bolting it together and not move so much on you, there's actually a little bolt that runs right through here and locks these plates in place. So that's interesting. I haven't seen that on other kits yet. It's quite the creative approach, and we'll see. Here's that there's 3 settings for these camber plates. I have to mull this over one more second before I bolt it together. Maybe I go for the neutral setting first. I don't know what to expect with the alignment on this car. I just don't. So maybe I go for neutral. We shall see. Okay, when it comes time to mount this thing, my suggestion is you pick whichever camber setting you want. I'm going to start up in the neutral position in the center with the camber plates, and then I would just hang the knuckle into the coilover, already having all the heim joints and stuff loosely pre-assembled on it, because that way it supports itself by its own weight, and I'm thinking that'll make your life easier, theoretically speaking. That bolt is started, just to make sure the arm doesn't go anywhere. Now we're going to try and do the same with the forward facing portion. A slight change of plans there. I'm going to separate the arm again. Put the tuning fork in the front first and then swing it over. Just the one lower control arm already holds this all in place fairly well. So now we're going to find home for the second guy. Yeah, the front arm ended up being a bit of a pain in the nuts, but oh well. So far I have completely eyeballed every setting just to get this on the car. And just like when we did the rear, this is just the install video. This isn't like an alignment by any means. So whatever gets the parts on the car, that's what we're going to be doing today. 21mm for the back, 24 for the front. There you go. Looks like front suspension, don't it? Shiny tie rod. I mean, that looks reasonably straight. So nothing about this currently is perfectly aligned. Nothing is even torqued down yet. This is all loosey-goosey, just taking a quick stab at looking that this is about right. So let's get a look at the steering sweep. This is going to be bonkers. Actually got a little bit of toe out right now. I can't shorten the tie rod anymore because the tie rod is messed up, if you remember. But regardless, this is going to be fun. Sweet baby Jesus. Let's do this all over again. Passenger side, round 2. This time, I'm just going to time lapse the whole thing, and you can take a look at it if you feel like it. See how it goes, including the heim adjustments. So when it comes to the heim adjustments, I always take a starting measurement from the bushing to the nut when the nut is ran up as far towards the heim joint as it can be. And then I agree on a baseline measurement that I set all the heims to. In this case I used 7mm. And then I know that everything is set the same, and I'll just adjust to taste from there. Camber plate, same setting as over there, starting with neutral. It would seem that I can actually use the sway bar end links that came with the ISC Coil-over kit. They're the annoying flavor with a female hex. Not a big fan of that style, but they're adjustable and they're the right length, it looks like. So I think we're in business here. Time to lift up the car so it's easier to get to stuff now that everything is hung. Go over all the bolts, torque everything down, put the hubs on, and then let's see, mount the wheels and see how well that all works out. for a first stab. Should I do one more steering sweep? Just to look at it? I think we should. Wheel bearing hub is back on the spindle. So what you can see what's left now is we need to mount the brakes again. And there are two things to note. One, you'll need extended brake lines. The brake lines won't reach as wide as the car is now. So what I did in the interim, again, just to move it around the shop, is I undid the fastener right there, a little 10mm, to get the mount off of the chassis, and that gives us more leniency with the length of the line. So now, because the sheet metal construction of this knuckle is thinner than the forging that comes from the factory, there are actually spacers that you need to put on the bolts so that your bolts don't drag on the rotors. So all that's left is put the rotor on, mount the brake caliper, and then we'll put wheels on the car and see how she sits. So these are the spacers that I mentioned that come with the kit. They just go on the fasteners for the fasteners not to protrude through the caliper and into the rotor. I never understand why brake caliper bolts don't have a dog point from the factory. These are always an unnecessarily pain in the assy step in your assembly for some reason. Let's get a little closer. Okay. I'm gonna go turn the steering wheel on the car now, and you'll see what I mean about the brake line. Yeah, as you can see, if you don't undo that bracket, you're just going to have a bad time. So I would say longer brake lines will be needed, and we can bolt the bracket back where it belongs and everything will clear. But like I said, to move it around the shop, this is going to do just fine. Who's curious to see how the wheels fit? Because I know I am. Based on where the hubs are, I'd say that's probably too low. I didn't even really try to slam the car right now, and I'm pretty sure that as soon as it sits on its own weight, we're going to have interference with the fenders the way we're sitting right now. So let's go check it out. I haven't lowered the car all the way off the lift yet, and we're already sitting on the fenders. So car goes back up, and we'll attempt to adjust the coil-over. Probably have to raise it at least an inch or more. So when I have to adjust ride height on a car with coilovers such as these, one of the things that I like to do is I find myself some reference piece, like in this case a socket, and you shove it up under the coilover right here, and I see that there's a little over 1.5 inches of the socket still sticking out the bottom. So now I know that if I adjust the coilover to where the socket is flush, I know how much it's going to raise the car. So that's, I find, a nifty little trick to speed up the process of adjusting ride height. So you have the ring right under the spring perch, and then the locking ring underneath that. If you torque those against each other, you'll be able to use those to spin the coilover body in the actual lower mount, and that's exactly what we're going to do right now. socket is now flush, meaning the car sits about 1.5 inches higher than it used to. Okay, car's off the lift. Had to raise it almost 2 inches in order to be able to come off the hoist. So I'll give you a good side view, front view. There's no spacers on this car. This is just how it sits with the FDF kit on the factory 18-inch wheels. And these aren't anything fancy. These aren't like even performance pack or any special edition. This is literally as base model as it gets. And there she is, all squatted and whatnot. Steering angle is absolutely nuts. Caster looks like it's a usable amount. And camber does not seem outrageous. This was the middle setting. And the front camber looks about like where you'd want it to be. So if we cut everything up for clearance and then lower the car again, we'll gain a little bit of camber, and that's probably what we'll want to do. Well, this concludes today's festivities. Up next is angle grinder, sawzall, jigsaw, whatever we need to use to clearance the tires in the front, because this is not drivable as is. So a lot of chopping coming up, but so for now, the FDF kit is on.